Good morning. So I was just coming out and I took a sip of water and I looked at the bottle and I couldn't help but laugh because it's Bismarck water. And Otto von Bismarck is the example of top-down change. But what I want to say today is that all of that is changing. That the story of social change today is of countless bottom-up stories, because I truly believe that anyone can create change. I know that every story can inspire 1,000 others, and I think that every single one of these stories is connected by a single golden thread. So the idea that I want to share with all of you today is the idea of heart power. I believe that the same force that drove the campaigns of Gandhi and of Martin Luther King and the fall of the Berlin Wall is echoing and multiplying through a growing swarm of everyday campaigns being run and being won by citizens and communities all over the world today. Heart power is the most extraordinary and the most transformational force in the world today, and it's just starting to take flight. What's that cloud in the background? It isn't actually a cloud, it's a swarm. It's called a murmuration of starlings. They're small birds, countless of them, circling and singing, picking up signals from each other's hearts and swarming together into what I believe is going to be a more hopeful future. Technology is connecting us like never before, and people everywhere are starting to have the means to level the playing field. Not once in a century, but every single day. That's why we've been working to build change as an open empowerment platform, giving everybody the tools, the know-how, and the connections to run their own campaigns, so that increasingly any one of us here in this room can tap into heart power and start a swarm of change. And all of that starts with what's in our hearts and our lives. So let me share some stories. This is Isabel de la Fuente. Her daughter, Cristina, was one of 5 girls killed during a stampede at the Madrid arena. The organizers sold 20,000 tickets, which was double the venue's capacity. They blocked the emergency doors with bars so that they could sell more drinks. And 5 girls died. Isabel was a mother, like any other mother, and her heart was breaking. But after a few days, she realized she never wanted another mother to go through what she had gone through. So Isabel started a petition on change, and she found an echo in the hearts of over 450,000 other people who added their names. And within weeks, she was sitting down with the regional governor of Madrid, and he agreed the reforms she was asking for. Isabel discovered her own heart power and shared it with others and inspired them to believe, and they created change. And this story is just one of thousands of heart power victories we've seen over the last couple of years on change. These little tinkers are my 2 children, my own 2 children, Sol and Rafi. And losing them would tear my heart apart. I was there when each one of them was born, and I know from that experience just how important things like good care and the support of a good midwife is at a moment like that. And Anka knows this too. Anka is a mother from Schwerin, and she discovered when she was having her child how important it is to have a midwife on your side, somebody who you can trust through pregnancy and birth and the weeks that follow. But she also learned that the profession of midwife here in Germany is starting to be undermined by skyrocketing insurance costs, and that this is something which politicians have ignored. So, last September, Anka was watching the Bundestag election results coming in on TV, and she thought, I have to do something. So, Anchor started a campaign for the midwife crisis to be addressed in the coalition treaty. Now, as you all know in this room, these agreements are traditionally negotiated from the top down between political elites. It's a Bismarck game. So this was a pretty bold step. But Anchor's campaign sparked public dialogue and made a connection with the experiences, with the hearts and the power of parents, of midwives, and of leaders across Germany. After 100,000 signatures, hundreds of calls, and conversations with decision-makers, finally they won. And a mother with no political background at all had achieved more than almost every professional lobbyist in Berlin. She shaped the outcome of that coalition treaty last year. And it didn't stop there. Today, the movement that Anchor sparked is swarming onto the streets and into the news around Germany. And they're working for implementation of those promises with new campaigns started by new changemakers like Mother Bianca, who raised over 380 signatures in recent weeks, as some of you will have seen. And this week is starting a bike ride to Berlin, hundreds of miles, to carry the campaign to the next step. You like the stalks? Beautiful. So the traditional way of thinking about power is that it works top-down. It's power over others. It's the possession of the few. It belongs to politicians, business leaders, elites sitting together in smoke-filled rooms like this. And this is another perspective on that our bureaucracies, our institutions have sometimes fallen into a similar trap. They've distanced power from people. They've alienated the public. Our markets, our brands, our economic systems sometimes seem to be struggling. Representative democracy, too, voting every few years, doesn't seem to be enough. Our systems and our lives are slipping out of step. Heart power turns these assumptions upside down and reconnects life with decision-making. And together, a swarm of Davids can face up to Goliath and win. Campaigns that are based in heart power can set the public agenda, as we see every day on change. And when we see people with whom we can identify creating change, winning, that connects with us on so many different levels, doesn't it? It sparks the hope that any one of us can have the power to change things for the better. But in the past, social change really was the exception and not the rule. It required extraordinary efforts beyond most people's reach. It took 62 years to build the movement to end the slave trade. Similar periods for the movements for workers' rights and democracy to start to take hold. But those movements were, I believe, galvanized by the same force that we've just been talking about, by heart power. Gandhi talked about it as satyagraha. This is sometimes translated as truth force or soul power. He started with people, bottom up. Gandhi knew that it was only by connecting with people's hearts and their daily lives that the power to liberate India from colonial rule would start to connect. And that's why he started the Salt March. Salt was something that every poor Indian family needed. It was a staple of their daily existence, and it was unfairly taxed and monopolized, and all of that made it a rich source of heart power. It was a lever and a channel through which India's people started to connect to each other in a new way and began to shake the British Raj to its foundations. Martin Luther King, too, studied Gandhi, actually, and he agreed that power and love belong together. Power without love is reckless and abusive, he said. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is love, correcting everything that stands against love. Why is heart power just so powerful? Because unlike the top-down power of guns or taxes, it's positive sum. Its truth spreads bottom up and freely from heart to heart and mind to mind. And it shifts the underlying landscape of our societies. You see it in political polling, you see it in market demand, and it starts to change the rules of the game for corporations and for governments. I'm sure there are people in this room who remember this. When the Monday demonstrations started in 1989 in Leipzig, East Germany, those demonstrations were manifesting what was in the hearts and the minds of people right across the GDR. Change, a better future, a normal life. This was not an ideological revolution. One of the main demands, as you know, was simply the right to travel across a border. The protests grew out of daily life. And their slogan, their heart power was, "We are the people." And Mikhail Gorbachev, visiting East Germany, responded to that call with his famous words to the East German leadership: "Those who come too late are punished by life itself." So he understood, or started to, the bottom-up momentum of heart power, and he engaged, at least to start with, in dialogue with it. When the wall fell, it was toppled, I believe, by heart power, by an irresistible wave of human energy moved by basic human truths. And most Soviet experts never predicted that. They focused on the top-down power in politics, and they missed the fact that that power is really borrowed from people bottom up. Heart power has, I believe, been the force behind some of the biggest changes in history. But it's not enough for it just to be the exception and not the rule. Revolutions can often turn out to be disappointments because the real work starts the day after. There are many smaller Berlin Walls in our daily lives and societies, in our markets, in our politics, and everyday democracy is where the real challenges, the greatest magic, are to be found. So change is a platform for this everyday democracy, and our mission is heart power. We call it to empower people everywhere to create the change they want to see. People start their own campaigns, we give them tips, we give them tools, we encourage them to look for achievable asks and compelling stories. The strongest campaigns grow fastest and win. And usage of our platform has exploded in the last couple of years. We were 6 million users at the beginning of 2012, now over 60 million. Tens of millions of those have already experienced victory, thousands of petitions created every month, and this is just the beginning. Our growth curve is already looking a lot like Twitter's, but as Stefan said earlier, we're a social enterprise. We're committed to maximizing our mission above everything else. I'm very proud of it. And increasingly, we see campaigns spreading horizontally on the platform, like wildfire through a forest. One campaign sparks 100 others. That's what I mean by the future of swarming change, a future where no one is powerless, where creating change is part of everyday life, a future where thousands of small local campaigns can link up and apply pressure to the world's most powerful governments and corporations, where decision makers start to realize that dialogue and responding is core to their job description. And we're seeing the green shoots of this future already today. The Boy Scouts, an institution at the heart of American culture and family life. But in 2012, they didn't accept gay people amongst them. So starting that year, the Boy Scouts of America were targeted by a swarm of campaigns on change.org, pressing them to accept gay scouts for the first time. A new movement, Scouts for Equality, sprung up on the platform. A swarm of others got involved. Corporate sponsors like UBS and pop stars started to distance themselves from the Boy Scouts. The support and the debate grew. Mother Karen Andresen launched a petition supporting her son Ryan, who had been denied his Eagle Scout badge for coming out as gay. They went around the talk shows and the media sharing their story. A mother championing her son gave this story even broader appeal, much more heart power. They bridged the polarization of the US and sparked empathy from those people who needed to be converted. And it was just one of a swarm of similar campaigns, hundreds of petitions signed by almost 2 million people. And that swarm became irresistible. Within a year, despite huge opposition, the ban on gay youth was voted down by a large majority of the Boy Scouts. This is the moment 2 of our petition starters knew that they'd won. Even the Mormon Church came out in support of that decision. Cultural change, heart power. This isn't just happening in Europe or America. Over the last year, after the outpouring of outrage over the Delhi rape story, we've seen campaigns for women's rights springing up right across India and significant victories in the movement to stop acid attacks as part of that on our platform. In Brazil last year, a huge campaign on political corruption when Congress wanted to exempt themselves from investigation. The bill was called PEC 37. State prosecutors didn't go to the Supreme Court. They just started a campaign on change.org. Soon there were hundreds of smaller petitions springing up around the country, challenging every congressperson individually on how they'd vote. This then went to the streets as an issue, and in the end, only 8 representatives voted for the bill. Heart power triumphed again, and public officials were leading the public charge. In one of my favorite campaigns from Thailand, 2 rural school teachers started a petition against an initiative by the government to close thousands of rural schools, went viral across social media, and within a week, thanks to heart power, images like this one became some of the most shared in Thailand. Then the story hit the front pages, the minister sat down and agreed to their demands. 6,000 schools were saved. The communities will be consulted on any reforms in future. And now Thailand is in an extraordinary moment of political transition. We saw an anti-corruption with over 600,000 signatures, and a more participatory democracy is being built brick by brick. This is a tweet posted last week by Laura Boldrini, the president of Italy's Chamber of Deputies, saying, "Thank you for your trust in institutions." She was responding to a campaign that had called for the release of Secret Service documents in a 20-year-old scandal about corruption, mafia, and the killing of 2 journalists, the kind of thing that made people very cynical in Italy about public institutions. And she called for a transparency march, and within hours, the government agreed. So this is trust, which is earned, which is two-way. The real magic starts to happen when decision makers open up to these everyday conversations. When institutions and leaders listen, their legitimacy, their effectiveness starts to grow, and they can start tapping into heart power too. We're seeing leading politicians and companies just starting now to sign up and to actively respond on change.org, from Washington to Barcelona. The rules of the game are changing, from top down to bottom up. Living democracy and living markets depend on this heart power, not just on our consent, but on our ideas and our active participation. So if they want to succeed in the 21st century, politicians and companies must engage in a conversation with citizens. I believe the future is swarming change. And I believe heart power is how all of us connect and come together to build a better society. I hope you agree. Thank you. Okay.